Greetings and welcome, I'm Ash, and today I would like to give you my thoughts on Sniper Ghost Warrior 3, an upcoming open-world tactical shooter with a heavy focus on player choice. It is going to be up to you to decide how you'll complete each mission, whether this be through pure stealth, over-the-top aggression, a couple dozen well-placed sniper shots, or some combination of those. I've recently had a chance to play the open beta, which contained 2 missions and a small chunk of the open world. So if you're wondering whether Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 is even worth your attention, allow me to give you my thoughts on the gameplay shown so far. Naturally, since this is a beta we're talking about, it is highly likely that some of the bugs and issues will be fixed by the time it actually launches. So do keep that in mind as we move forward. Once I got through the fairly boring tutorial, I instantly realized that Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 is going to be a game after my own heart. Not only does it give you the ability to purchase and customize weapons, but it also requires you to spend some of your hard-earned money on ammo and gadgets in order to actually make the missions possible. In the beta, I pretty much had infinite money, so none of this really mattered. But the amount of cash I got from the missions themselves was by no means enough to support a wasteful playstyle. While some people might consider this annoying, I genuinely love games that require you to prepare before a big mission. As such, before you even leave your hideout, you're going to have to ask yourself, do I need armor-piercing rounds or will normal bullets be enough? Will I require a drone in order to scout a wide open area, or am I going to spend most of my time indoors? Am I planning to pack some grenades in case things go loud, or will I just wing it? And the list goes on. The more options you have, the easier the mission will be, that much is obvious. But the more peripherals you buy, the less money you will have for armor and new weaponry. So striking a nice balance is hopefully going to be an important factor. My only fear is that halfway through the campaign you'll have all of the weapons you need, so special ammo and gadgets will no longer be as scarce, but that is a worry for another day. As you might imagine from a game with sniper in its name, the various weapons you can buy are all pretty much satisfying to use. I've personally stuck with the default sniper, though I did upgrade an AK-47 with a better scope and a proper silencer. And throughout my 4-hour playthrough, I was never disappointed with either weapon. It did take me a little while to get used to the sniper rifle, however, as unlike most other games, it is not purely a point-and-click adventure. You need to account for both elevation and wind speed when taking your shot, but don't worry, it is nowhere near as complicated as it sounds. While it doesn't drastically increase the skill required in order to snipe faraway enemies, it does make rush shots fairly difficult. So you better make sure your opponents don't see you while you're still fiddling with your scope, or things might just turn very ugly. If they do spot you, however, you're going to have to prepare for a proper gunfight because the guards in Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 are practically clairvoyant. The moment one of them gets a clear view of you, the whole encampment will slowly start encroaching towards you. And if you haven't cleaned out the area beforehand, this can very quickly get out of control. Even though the AI isn't amazing by any stretch, I mean, it tends to stay in the open way too long, but it will still try to flank you from multiple directions at once, which does give it the edge it needs to be an actual threat. I've only played on the default difficulty, and even though you can take quite a few bullets before dying, any sort of combined fire is enough to ruin your day within seconds. The same applies to your enemies, as it only takes a single bullet to the head to bring them down, but even so, I wouldn't recommend taking on entire armies without a trick up your sleeve, as otherwise you're going to find yourself very dead very quickly. Instead of going berserk and hoping the enemy is employing stormtroopers, it is much smarter to first scout out the area, stealthily take out key targets, and then go on with whatever plan you had in mind. In order to do this efficiently, Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 gives you the ability to deploy a rather adorable little drone you can fly around. Its use is pretty much entirely dedicated to scouting, much to my disappointment since I was planning to stick a cannon on it, but once you start getting to some of the more open-ended sections it becomes obvious why. There are simply far too many areas the enemies can and will hide in, so if you don't do reconnaissance before jumping in, you're going to swiftly find yourself riddled with more holes than a fine piece of cheese. This becomes glaringly obvious during the first mission that sends you to a rundown building complex with 3 or 4 snipers hiding on the various rooftops. If you don't figure out their location and take them down before advancing, your movement is going to be extremely restricted, as any open space can and will be a potential death trap. I am perfectly fine with this as a concept, but in the beta version these snipers are a bit too hard to avoid through pure stealth. They should be able to easily see you when you're walking in the middle of nowhere, but when you're sneaking through the bushes, a sniper on the other side of the compound should not be able to see you, especially if he's not actively searching for you. Thankfully, this is the only case of unfair stealth AI I've encountered in the beta. Every other enemy type behaves pretty much exactly as you would expect, completely blind and deaf at a distance and incredibly easy to alert once close. In order to compensate for the added risk of close quarters combat, you have the obvious inclusion of melee takedowns, but more interestingly, the ability to interrogate your victims about various mission objectives. The information they share with you really isn't that important, but it does occasionally give you a glimpse at alternative routes and interesting ways of solving the mission. So in my eyes, it is a great little addition to an otherwise fairly standard stealth system. And speaking of missions, I had the chance to do 2 of them. Cut Off, where I had to realign a large antenna array in order to intercept enemy communications, and Blockout, where I had to sneak into an abandoned building complex, retrieve a high-tech drone, and dispose of a would-be warlord. Given the diversity in these 2 missions, you might assume the story that follows them is equally as interesting, but unfortunately it is about as generic as it gets. There is very little emotional attachment to the task at hand, the whole mission is described in 3 sentences, and there is basically no payoff at the very end. I am sure all of this will tie into some sort of grand narrative once the full version of Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 finally arrives, but the stuff I've seen so far does not inspire me with much confidence. While I found the story to be about as engaging as watching paint dry, I'm glad to say that the locations the missions take place in are all well crafted. Each one features a wide open area with plenty of avenues for approach, a couple of side objectives you can complete to help you out with the main task, and most importantly, enough cover and hidden pathways to make all playstyles equally viable. I've tried playing Blockout 3 times, and each time I've managed to complete it in a drastically different way. The first time around, I crawled my way through a ruined building in order to snipe my target from the opposing roof. The second time, I fought my way through the building complex in order to fight the target directly. And the third time, it was getting kind of late, so I just said screw it and threw a grenade in there, which, to my surprise, actually worked. The only real problem I have with the level design was the simple fact that you can avoid far too many of your enemies, which makes things a bit too easy for experienced stealth players. I'd imagine this is going to become less of an issue in some of the later missions, but I found the beta content to be a bit too simple for my liking. With that said, if the rest of the missions continue on with this sort of level design, but with a bit of added complexity, I have a feeling Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 is going to be well worth playing, even if the story ends up being completely meaningless. After playing through the Blockout mission 3 times, and all 3 times using sneaky tactics in order to infiltrate the complex, I've come to realize I have one extremely big problem with Sniper Ghost Warrior 3. I really hate how the main character moves while sneaking. Instead of having nice and smooth movement, your character constantly wobbles up and down, and as an added bonus, he also constantly sways from side to side. A friend of mine dubbed it the duck walk, and honestly, that is a rather apt comparison given that your character doesn't actually walk, he waddles like a duck. I understand the developers are trying to go for a realistic approach, so as you crawl through the undergrowth, your massive sniper rifle will sway from side to side. But trying to focus on the game itself while your camera and weapon are having separate dance parties is incredibly annoying. So here's to hoping the launch version will bring with it an option to disable all of this. And since I'm already talking about annoying things, it is also worth mentioning that the vehicles have the same problem in realism. You cannot drive your car off-road and expect it to remain nice and smooth while plowing through bushes and rocks. That much I can understand. But the issue here is that the cars are only half realistic. So while the cars themselves behave as you would expect, the driving controls are straight out of an arcade game, which is not a combination that works very well. Trying to keep your car nice and stable on a bumpy road is a hard thing to do at the best of times, but when you turn like you're on ice, by which I mean both quickly and violently, things tend to become downright unbearable. After spinning out and slamming into a tree for the 10th time, I finally gave up and started only using fast travel locations. Because if you can't go fast and do ridiculous stunts with an all-terrain vehicle, what is the point of even using one when teleportation is an option? Chances are high I might change my mind when Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 releases in full, given that the open world content available in the beta was basically a small chunk of a small chunk. To the developer's credit, however, that small chunk has been quite interesting to explore. I found a giant ruined tower, and naturally fell off of it because I'm a giant idiot, took down numerous enemy outposts, and even explored a recently flooded church. Most importantly, at no point did I see a location that was a simple copy-paste job, though take this statement with a grain of salt given how limited the map really was. I am personally not the type that spends hours chasing collectibles and completing everything on the world map, but the bonus locations I found throughout my beta journey have proven to be a rather pleasant distraction from the main missions, so honestly I can't say I'm not glad to see them included. I entered the beta with very little knowledge about Sniper Ghost Warrior 3, but after spending a couple of days sneaking around, I must admit my interest is now piqued. Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 is by no means perfect, and the beta has shown me plenty of annoying bugs, but at the end of the day, I'm left wanting more. So if the developers could fix some of the issues and also give us an option to disable the constant headbanging, I could easily see Sniper Ghost Warrior 3 being one of the more interesting stealth games out there. It is worth keeping in mind, however, that all of my opinions are based on a fairly limited beta build. So as always, I would recommend waiting until proper reviews come out before making your purchase, just to be on the safe side. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. And with that said, I hope you have a nice day, and I will see you soon. See ya!